Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome. I hope you've had a wonderful lunch. And now that we are all comfortable on full stomach, I, Caroline, would like to reconvene the Be Connected virtual conference. We have with us for this session a very versatile speaker, Senthil Kumar Tirunavakarsu, who will present to us data transformation, a key for successful ERP migration. Senthil is the head of enterprise applications and a member of information technology leadership team at Western Digital. With more than 23 years of experience in IT focused on manufacturing and technology industry, Senthil brings global management experience in enterprise applications and building high-performance global IT teams responsible for partnering and supporting various business processes, including finance, supply chain planning, order to cash, source to pay, plan to fulfill, product lifecycle management, and supplier customer collaboration. Before I hand over the session to Senthil, just to reiterate, we have a Q&A session in the end. Feel free to send in your questions in the Q&A section below. Please welcome with me, Senthil Kumar Tirunavakarsu.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks for the nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning if you're on the other side of the world. I don't have too many slides to cover today. I hear that I have a 1 hour session. So I would like this session to be as interactive as possible, right? So I know it's right after lunchtime in many parts of US, so I'll try my best to keep you awake during the session, right? So let's try just the logistics. I have like a few slides. I want to just give you a background. My discussion is going to be about data migration, data transformation, but I first want to start with a background on based on which program that I'm talking about these, right? And then we'll go through some of the experiences that we had during the journey, and I'll share those experience in the context of data transformation. And I'm sure we'll have a much longer Q&A session, right, compared to your other sessions. So and we can always go back and forth. I'm going to be controlling my slides, so we can just go back and forth to specific slides, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions related to that. Okay, so we'll get started. I won't go through the agenda. So this is the the ERP transformation journey. I'm not here to talk about this journey, right? How we did our migration, or what this ERP transformation is about. But I just want to give you some background on when I'm talking about data migration, data conversion, I'm talking with respect to this ERP migration that we went through here in Western Digital. And this was like a 5+ year journey. And unique about this, we have, myself, I've been in this ERP and enterprise application space for quite a long time. We have gone through every major program has a data conversion, right? Data conversion is always a major activity. But one thing unique is, we were moving multiple legacy ERP systems into Oracle Cloud ERP. So you can understand the challenge, right? So moving from one ERP to another ERP itself is challenging. Sometimes even just doing a technical upgrade, it's a challenge, right? But in this case, we had 2 SAP systems, one EBS system, right? And they were one of the SAP and the EBS was there for about 25 years, right? So people have been using it. There are data. There will be, even within an ERP system, data is not fully harmonized, right? Especially when it has been used over several years. There is a lot of customization and a lot of coding, custom code involved in these ERP systems. So from there, we decided to go into a 2B platform. To just give a little bit more background, the reason why we ended up starting this project is the fact that today's Western Digital is a combination of 3 companies, right? The merger of 3 companies, right? The legacy Western Digital, another Hitachi Global Storage Technologies, and SanDisk, right? So these 3 different storage companies coming together. Not only that, we had 3 different ERP applications. We had 3 different ERP application and an ecosystem which comes along with that, right? We had to merge that we had to go into the 2B ERP application. So we came up with a roadmap. We had to do a lot of process, re-engineering as we went through this journey. We had to come up with, a new chart of account for the company, right? We had to come up with a new cost center structure. The customer master has to be harmonized, the supplier master has to be harmonized. So we went through that, and we didn't do everything in one phase. Our number one goal was to make sure that we minimize the disruption, right, or we eliminate business disruption, because these are like three different companies, right, successfully running companies. When they are coming together, we want to make sure that there's no disruption to the business process. So that's why it was an elongated multi-phase. Each phase had multiple releases. Some of the releases had multiple waves, right? So we went through this journey. As you can imagine, right, data conversion was very important, and it's not that we got it perfect right from the get-go, right? There were a lot of experience from our phase one and phase two, which helped us to go search for the right way to do data conversion, search for a tool to do it instead of using Excel spreadsheets and macros in Excel spreadsheets, which we started right when we were in the earlier phases. Which took us a lot of time. The data conversion activity itself took us a lot of time away from other things, right? So that experience, helped us to go focus on a concerted activity to go look at what is the right way to go do data conversion, and also the timing of it, right? Data conversion doesn't come in the middle, doesn't come in the end, but when we kick off a project, we have a track for data conversion starting from day one, right? And we also started using the changes tool for all our data conversion activities starting from phase 3 until we continue to use that. So this is the background that I want to give. And then I want to now go and rest of the conversation, right? I want to focus more on data conversion. So we can always come back to this, if you have any Q&A, we can come back and discuss here, okay? So why, right? So first I want to know, why do we need to have a smart data conversion approach? Data conversion is something that we have been doing, right? So even 20 years back, if we had moved from some legacy system to this big SAP or EBS, we had data conversion, or any system. When we moved to Salesforce, we had data. So every application, we have data conversion is something that we have always been doing, right? There's nothing, this is not new, but there are some challenges now, right? So one is, the fact that, in our case, right, we went into a cloud-based, ERP application, right? So we don't have a capability to go build our own objects, own tables, build some custom logic. So even without harmonizing the data, you just, you can migrate, and then you can have some custom codes which can go and manage those, data which is not harmonized, right? So for us, that was not the choice, because this is Oracle Cloud ERP standard application where we have not written any custom code. We can have our own additional fields, but we cannot have our own tables, our own programs, right? So that then it becomes very important that the data, especially the data coming from 3 different companies, that needs to be harmonized, right? So not only the data, even the process needs to be harmonized. So we had to spend a lot of time upfront working with the business owners, working with the track leads to make sure that the process is harmonized, and every data, whether it's a supplier master, customer master, we have a clear approach on how to harmonize the data. Every attribute of the data needs to be harmonized. We need to decide what the to be list of values are going to be. How do we do the mapping for those values so that we are able to go do this data conversion, right? So that's one. And then the second thing is the enormous nature of the data conversion. So you can imagine, right? So there are 3 like $6 to $7 billion companies, right, coming together. There'll be a lot of transactional data, a lot of master data that needs to get converted. So there's no way we'll be able to do those things manually, right? So we do need to have an automated way to do the conversion during the project. We need to have an automated way to do the validations, and it needs to be a proven system, right? So that when we are finally doing the conversion activity and we are doing the final production conversion activity and validation, we can do it within a window which is constrained. We cannot have an unlimited. We are talking about manufacturing. We are talking about factories. If you can recall in the previous slide, it shows that there are about 10 factories that we moved. They were worldwide factories. These are all these factories and the logistics operation that happens within the factories and to the external customer. They're all operations which run 24/7, right? So even though we can cut off ERP and we can have a business continuity in place, it's still constrained. You can have like 2 days, maybe maximum like 70 hours of downtime, but but you cannot have an unlimited number of cutover time. Okay, so that's the why part of it, right? Then what are we talking about, right? So when we say data conversion, so what are we talking about? So so one is it's not just the mapping that I talked right in the middle of my conversation about why, but there is a lot of effort that goes on, especially if you're moving from multiple applications or from multiple organizations into one, when you're trying to integrate a company, or even the same company, if you're trying to move from multiple application to one, there's a lot of standardization, harmonization that happens upfront, which is important, right? Because if that is not done correctly, then anything else that you do, even if you have the great process to extract, convert, and reconcile, that's not going to work, right? So in our case, we put a lot of effort to standardize and harmonize our data that needs to go into the to-be system. And then I mentioned that when during any phase there was always 2 or 3 legacy ERP systems, right? So we need to extract from SAP, we need to extract from EBS, and then we need to load it into Oracle Cloud. And in some cases, we need to load it into another application, Stamp or Salesforce, right? So we had our to-be landscape identified. We know the process is already established there, configurations are there, and now we need to migrate the data. So when we are doing this extraction from these multiple systems, we need to make sure that not only that we are showing how it was loaded correctly, we need to make sure that it was extracted correctly. The extraction was a much bigger challenge than even loading it in the to-be system, right? So because when you're loading it, it doesn't matter which legacy it came from, you're just loading into one system. But extraction now, we were doing, especially if you understand the ERP applications, for the same transaction, right? It could be a purchase order, right? A purchase order at a high level, it's the same, right? Whether it's in SAP or in Oracle. But when you extract the data, we could clearly see that there's a lot of nuances, a lot of differences between how Oracle EBS was handling purchase orders and how SAP was handling purchase orders, right? So I just want to give you an example, right? So when we did these conversions, right? So we know that when it comes to the PO header, PO line, and then you go, there's not too much difference between how Oracle, EBS, and SAP was handling the data. But once you go down below that, and once you talk about schedule lines, you talk about supplier confirmations, then there was night and day difference between how SAP was handling it, how EBS was handling it, and now we need to harmonize the data and then convert it into Oracle Cloud, which was even different from EBS, right? So that's the complexity that was involved, in our and then there are many cases, even when you're trying to convert your data from your legacy ERP to say Salesforce, right? So those kind of challenges are pretty common. So that's why we need to focus on the extraction itself, and we need to have an ability to go and show that we extracted correctly to the end user, right? Not directly take them to an end-to-end validation. So we need to make sure that we extract it correctly. And if we are doing the data mapping, we need to show that we have mapped correctly. And when you load, then you load and download, and then you reconcile to make sure that the loading went correctly, right? And then these, we had these, A, B, C, we could differentiate the different steps of what we convert and reconcile between every step, and reconcile between across the steps, right? From extraction all the way to loading. Also, we should be able to reconcile, considering all the transformation activity or all the data mapping activity that takes place before that. So that's in a nutshell on what it's all about, right? Why is this important? So now other than it comes to how, right? So what we found out after we do our phase one, phase two, it was not that phase one, phase two of our roadmap didn't have complex data migration, right? So we had to establish our chart of accounts. We had to establish our cost center or the department hierarchy, and we had to go through a very extensive supplier master harmonization and then loading into, right? So we had supplier masters from 3 different ERP. We had like 35,000 plus supplier masters, and then even within an ERP, this was a typical case where for some reason the same supplier was created multiple times, right? So even the data from one ERP was not harmonized, right, in any way. So now we had to harmonize. We didn't want to create duplicate suppliers in our 2B system, right? So we had to use so many different identifiers. We had to use external parties like Bloomberg, right? So we did all that to make sure that we have a approach for harmonizing the data, right? And then this is to make sure that we are not duplicating the suppliers, right? But that's just at a header level. We can use tax ID, we use so many different things to do that. But coming to the different attributes of those supplier master itself, it was a much bigger challenge, right? So because the same payment term, even if it's a 30-day net 30 payment term, right? So even within a single ERP system, we see that there are multiple payment terms with the same different there are some different nuances. So it was very important for us to decide what the to be set of values that we are going to use, and then map it from the legacy. And when we had to prove to our users that this mapping was working, right? So that was really important. And then the step-by-step reconciliation that I was talking about, right? So that was very, very key. So we had a bad experience. It's not that we failed in our supplier master conversion. We did, but the difficulty that we faced and the amount of time it took to do that supplier conversion, it was a valuable lessons learned for us, right? So we know that we are not going to, at that point, we have not harmonized our item master or our customer master. So there were several transaction conversions, which we have not done that at that point, right? So we used that experience to, and then we were sure that we are not going to go into the next phase with the same approach on what we did. So it doesn't matter how complex or how complicated Excel spreadsheets that you have, still asking a user to go validate based on Excel spreadsheet, right? You can come up with some color schema, you can come up with some highlights, you can create some summary, you can create drill down. You can do a lot of things just with an Excel spreadsheet, but still there is a limitation, right? There is a trust factor, right? Because Excel spreadsheet can go wrong in many ways, and it took us a lot of time to a lot of churns to get that confidence and then get it approved. But once we had that experience, then we moved from the third phase until the last phase, right, where we moved all the factories. So we started using tool, right? We started using the Changes tool, and then what we did is from the we didn't use if we are using one tool for extraction and another tool for loading, then how do we make sure that the handshake happens properly, right? So we use the same tool to do the extraction and then reconcile and show that the extraction was done correctly, reconcile and show that the extraction was done as per the rules, right? Then we use the tool. We had used some other Oracle tool too to do when it comes to data mapping, but we also kept that same mapping, all the the mapping tables and the mapping rule engines all in the same tool, so that again we are relying on something that where it does the extraction, which it does the conversion activities, right, based on the mapping table, and it also does the loading. It takes back the data from what was loaded and it reconciles. So that way we are able to reconcile in every step. And we are also able to reconcile between, step A and step D, right? So we are able to reconcile both step by step and end-to-end reconciliation. And once you do this, during your UAT conversion, and then we conduct a few mocks, then when it comes to your production conversion, at that point, we could gain more and more confidence from our end users, right? So the people who are in the super users, right, who are involved, heavily during this process, they started seeing the tool, they started using it hands-on. They even for validation, there was no other Excel spreadsheet outside of this, right? They don't download, and so they were able to use the tool directly. They were able to drill down and then see that they now started trusting the process. And then when it went to production conversion, then we are just repeating what we did. We used to even do mocks right like the week or 2 weeks before the production, so that we are pretty much close to on the conversion activity, right? So, and we in some cases actually we took a different approach where we would even do the conversion during the pre-cutover activity, and we will do the delta conversion as part of the cutover activity. So we could do all these things because we were using the same tool. All the data was already there, right? So we know the tool which we are using for extraction and conversion and loading is the same tool which is plugging into our legacy ERP systems, right? So it knows what it extracted. It knows to go and find the deltas and then do the delta conversion in order for us to reduce the conversion window. So the next, I just wanted to summarize here. So we talked about the approach, right? So which is very, very important. So we need to have a smarter approach where not only the conversion activity, you need to have a clear vision about how you're going to extract, how are you going to do your mapping, you're going to do the migration, how you're going to do the reconciliation. This can easily make or break an ERP program, right? So even if you get everything else right, you're able to have a design. You did all your design configurations correctly, and you go live. Most of the time, I think people who are in this space, that majority of the issues, right? So maybe the 1 or 2 days, you will know if your configuration is wrong or if your coding is wrong. That you will be able to catch up. You will be able to find that and then fix it maybe in a day or a week or a couple of weeks, right? You should be able to very early in your hypercare time, you will be able to catch and fix those. But the data related issues that you see in a post ERP program, sometimes if you don't do it well, it can run for months, right? So that that kind of elongates our stabilization period. So I talked about end-to-end visibility and drill down capability, right? When you are asking business to validate, there's no point asking them, doesn't matter how fancy our Excel spreadsheets are. There's no point asking someone to go validate in an Excel spreadsheet, especially when you have like thousands of lines of data. In some cases, we had like millions of data, right? So like, we converted serial numbers. So we had 2 legacy ERP systems and peripheral tools. Each one of them had like 1 billion serial numbers, right? So from that, I mean, it's not, serial number is not just one table, right? So, we do track and trace using serial numbers. We do, all our warranty processes using, serial numbers. So there are like clustered tables of the same, serial number, information. So we have some master data like, country of origin, things which are associated with serial numbers. So when we are extracting, even though what we extract is just a subset, right? So we probably extracted like 600 million serial number out of like 2.5 billion serial numbers from the multiple legacy systems. But how do you go validate? I mean, it's not even possible in those cases. That's a typical example where you can't even imagine. You cannot just have Excel spreadsheets to prove that you did a conversion correctly, right? So even in other cases where we are talking about purchase orders, sales orders, there it's not like in billions, right? So there the data is in say few hundred thousands. When it comes to supplier master, customer master, they are like 30,000, 40,000 numbers. But even in those cases where your number of data is still manageable, but the number of attributes that you have, like say for a purchase, you will have hundreds of attributes, right, in a purchase order when you're converting from a legacy system. So it's not possible at all, right, even to use Excel spreadsheet until you have built a tool to do those conversion. You have built automation within that conversion activity. There is no way to positively say that you have done the conversion and you have done the validation and you are able to give some meaningful validation reports, right, where business can validate at a summary level, they can drill down samples and validate at a detailed level, and then they can confidently sign off, right? So that automated approach are really required, right? So either in cases when there is millions of records involved, or even in cases where your records are in thousands, but still the number of attributes are huge and there are clustered tables, especially then there's no way you can do without automating it, right? And I talked about reliable reconciliation and validation approach. That's really key, right? So I talked about there were several factories that migrated from legacy ERP to Oracle Cloud. So these factories were running 24/7. Even though we had a downtime in some cases about 48 hours, some cases about 72 hours of downtime that we could buy, mostly during weekends and between Asia and US, right? We would try to elongate the time more than 48 hours, but still it was a constraint, right? It was it cannot. So if we had planned to have a 48-hour downtime for the factory, then the factory is still running, right? It's not, nothing is, the lines are still running, but they would accumulate all those data in manufacturing systems, and there are some central databases, but that has a limit. So we cannot, when we say 48 hours, we need to go live at at the end of that time, right? So we need to have a highly reliable and dependable approach, right, before we reach to the production cutover. So if not, we can't even start a production cutover confidently. So we did go through, we had multiple phases where we did. And I think I would say that, there are a lot of things which contributed to the successful, production cutovers. But one of the, I would say one of the items in top of that list is the changes, the tool and the teams who worked with us to ensure that our data conversion activities happen in an automated way. And also it created that, a trust in that, right? So because the business users started seeing, many of them, especially like say finance users, right? So it's very, very critical for finance, right, to make sure that the inventory is converted. Right? So when we're removing inventory from a legacy system, and when we are inputting the inventory into the to-be system, so there it's not that you can be 99% right? You have to be 100%. You cannot just go and do some adjustments to your balance sheet, right? So we had to go to that level of accuracy, so to convince finance team that they were not going, and they cannot go see every data, right? So they had to rely on tools. But some of the users like finance, they have seen it one phase after another, one release after another, then they also started trusting the tool, right? So that they started trusting the data that they see in the tools, right? They are able to use those validation reports, drill down reports. So that helped us, and one thing which was in our favor is, as we moved from phase to phase, the complexity and the magnitude of the data that had to be converted also started increasing. So building that trust over a period, it helped us a lot. Okay, so it's about half the time. So I'm done with my slides. So I don't have any other slide to cover here. So the rest of the time, I would like to, keep it as an interactive session. I'm open to questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sendil. That was very insightful. I have question and answers questions coming in from our attendees. So here's the first question. What are the top challenges faced before Changes was involved, and how did Changes product help you overcome the challenges?
Yeah. So I think some of it I've already mentioned it, right? So I talked about, which is very close to my heart, right? So, if you look at our, going back to this roadmap, right, in our phase 2, you see supplier lifecycle management, right? Which means, we did harmonize and we did harmonize the suppliers across our 3 companies. It's not that that was the only data conversion activity that we did between phase 1 and phase 2, right? You can imagine there are a lot of things which would have gone through when it came to our chart of accounts and departments and all that. Many of these things we did using Excel spreadsheets, right? So which was okay, it kind of worked. But when it came to the supplier master conversion, even though we had like 35,000 plus supplier master, the fact that the data was not harmonized within a sub, right, or within one of the companies, right, which merged, and we had to go and create a single, data, right, a single supplier master where there's no duplication, and then every attribute is harmonized. So it was the most challenging experience out of the first 2 phases, which took us an enormous amount of time during the project and even during every cutover, even if it's a cutover preparation for UAT or for production cutover, that became the longest pole in the tent, right? So that became the critical area. That became the highest risk area, right? So the fact that we didn't have a single tool for extracting, for doing all the mapping activity, harmonizing the data, and then loading it in the 2B system, downloading and validating. So we had to use different Excel spreadsheets, and we had to work with the business. In some cases, they just have to trust, right, the consultants and the business analysts working with them without 100% confident. And that business leaders, they wouldn't like to do that, right? But in our case, there was not much of a choice, right? But so when we moved to this tool, we were very, very clear, right, that we are not going to use Excel spreadsheets for validations anymore. So when every other data conversion activity that we went through in our roadmap, we made sure that how we are going to validate, then we work backwards on how we are going to extract, how we are going to transform, how we are going to do the reconciliation. Everything was just, we went backward, because first we need to know that we have a solid way of reconciling the data and proving to business that, yeah, we are able to do this and they can rely on that. And so that's how we started, right? And then once we started using the changes tool, right? So in the how we mentioned that, we use the changes tool was used from the data extraction. So we use the SAP adapters to take data from SAP. We use the Oracle EBS adapters to take data from EBS. So even any code that that's important, right? Say, for example, you're writing a code to extract data, and then for some reason, if you have not maintained the right version of the code, and if you kept changing that code over a period of time, then whatever you did during your testing and mock, then finally when you do a data conversion, then even the extraction is going to be different, right? So we made sure that we even control the code used for extraction within the tool. So we know exactly what the version of the code was, when we did UAT, when we did mock 1, mock 2, and then production. So if there was a difference, then we made it very clear to the business users that, yeah, we made this tool so that they can pay specific attention to the area which was changed, right? So similarly, the mapping tables was there within the tool. So previously, we used to have all these things in different tools, right? So the mapping tables were all built. In some cases, the mapping tables will be there for the purpose of ongoing business process. The mapping table is there somewhere, but we established those interfaces that those mapping tables are there in both places. And then the loading itself was also done from the changes tool, and all the reconciliation and drill down. Since we are doing everything, right, from extraction to load, everything we did using the changes tool, so we could easily drill down, right? We have summary reports, because there's no way in production cutover they're going to go and look at these millions of lines of data, right? So they have to rely on summary data. But since they have done this over the last several months, right, so they were more confident, but they could even take some sample data and then drill down into the details. And we also had changes is not just a tool, right? So we also had experience, experts from changes, right, who were part of our team, part of the Western Digital team throughout this journey, right? So we had some really good people who understood ERP, they understood finance and procurement, right, or order to cash processes end to end. It is not just taking some data, right, like millions of lines and hundreds of attributes, taking it from one system to another, right? There are some processes involved behind it, right? So each one had some specific meaning. So unless the team who are involved understand what it is, it will be very difficult to do that, do this activity. So that way, it's not only the tool, it's even the people whom we got from Changes were very helpful in this data conversion activity.
That's awesome. Please share the best approach for cutover planning. Where did you capture the Delta transactions during the cutover window? How were those brought into the Oracle Fusion Cloud applications? These are two questions, so I'm just clubbing it. Do you want?
So I mentioned, right, a few times during this conversation that we made sure that we don't do anything new when we did production conversion, right? So especially when there are like 4 factories, or in some cases 2 major mega factories, right? We are taking ERP out of the factory, and then we are promising them that within 48 hours we are going to come back, or within 72 hours, they are going to be back live. So we cannot take any chances, right? So we proved our entire process multiple times, right? So even when we do UAT, we build the UAT system just like how we will build production system. So that's something that consistently that we have done, right? So in addition to that, we will do mock, right? So depending on the sensitivity, depending on how how the previous migration went, right? We would do 1 or more mock conversions, and one of the mock conversion we'll do very close to production conversion, so that this entire process, people, everything, they are all in this cycle, right? Where they clearly understand, each one understands what their role is. They understand the timing of it. So we used to have we used to have a clear, hour by hour data conversion plan, which we will use even, and which we will build during the initial set of conversion activities. And then we would finalize it. And by the time we do the last mock, or the only mock in some cases, we would, do the rehearsal. So we'll, in many cases, we'll use the same people. Now, only thing we may not do is, we won't do, if we are doing it within 72 hours, right, we won't keep people for 72 hours, right, during the mock, right? Sometimes we have done that too, depending on the critical nature, but in most cases we would expand that over time, but we'll still count the hours of activity that it took, so that we are confident when we go and do the production conversion.
How much volume of data was migrated from legacy to target, and did the Changes tool perform well with high volume data migration needs?
Yeah, so you can clearly imagine, right? So from phase 3 until we did phase 4B, which involved phase 4E, between 4A and 4B, there are 10 factories, right? So these are like vertically integrated factories that we moved, and then we moved entire order orchestration, which involved customer masters, involved products, and it involved bill of materials, and involved transaction data, right? We have even though we did the indirect procurement in phase 2, we had production procurement in phase 4A, 4B, right? So we had, we had like purchase orders involved, right? So we have gone through seven. So if any of these data conversion activity was critical, we used the Changes tool, right? Because we got that was the whole purpose of the tool, right? We used it for data conversion. So the biggest one, or the most complex one out of all, was the serial number conversion, right? So serial number out of the 2 legacy systems, right, like hard drives and SSDs, right, from day one of when they were sold, like some of them are like 25 years back, right? So in these ERP systems were serialized, right? So even when they were making like 1 million, or when they were making 200 million hard drives, each and every hard drive was serialized, right? Similarly, every SSD was serialized. So we had like billions of serial numbers, both in EBS and in SAP. So and then they were all not in, they were in more customized tables, because we never, it's very difficult to use when you're making millions of products, serialized product. you can't use the equipment master functionality in ERP, right, to manage serial numbers, right? So that's more for when you're building, big systems, or you're building an automobile or an airplane, right? Then you can use the, equipment master functionality in ERP. But if you're just making products in millions, then you have to build some customized functionality within ERP, right? So we had built a new application to manage track and trace and warranty repairs and all that. But when we extracted out of the legacy ERP system, this was a much more, this was the most complicated, right? So serial numbers, exist in customer serial number data. They exist in, inventory tables, because inventory also, the finished goods inventory is managed at not only at a serial number level, it is managed at a handling unit level, right? So you have serial numbers, which goes into boxes, which goes into pallets. So we had to manage these handling units. There are several tables which manage handling units. But then when we go, ship it from one location to another, there are serial numbers which are in transit, right? There are serial numbers which are issued and received. And then finally, those are issued to the customer, right? Then it goes into the customer serial number tables. And we need to, when we are converting, all these things that I talked about, they're all in flux, right? They're all moving around. They're not just sitting in one location, right? So we had to, that was the most complex, activity where, we had to extract out of the legacy repository, which had close to about 2.5 billion serial numbers. But when we put them into the 2B system, almost we converted about 600 plus, 600 million plus serial numbers in the 2B system. So that was, I would rate that as the most complex serial number activity, most complex data conversion activity that we used changes for.
Okay. And how much of testing cycles you would recommend for a data migration project?
Yeah, so it depends on, how stable or how the results of each cycle. So we always, try to adopt and, we always have an approach, because in any given implementation, the longest testing phase is your UAT, right? So we adopted an approach where every time when we're doing UAT, we would do that will be like sometimes 3 months before your production cutover, right? Or it could be even more. But we would do just like a cutover activity, right? So we would do the data conversion, but at that time we won't have our cutover plans in place. We won't have all our data migration codes and approaches, and the changes to everything is not set yet, right? But we'll still use that. We will try to finalize our plans, or at least come up with the draft plans as part of the UAT conversion, and that will be our first way. We would have done all the testing of these individual unit testing of these individual conversion activities before that. But UAT, the building of UAT system will be the first time when we test everything end to end, right? And that won't be perfect, right? During UAT, we'll find a lot of holes, and then we'll keep going and updating. Just like we go and fix those configurations and other things, we will also be fixing our data conversion activities. And then depending on how well it went, right, we will be doing some more standalone testing for areas which didn't work well. And then we will do a mock, right? So we'd preferably do at least 2 mocks, but we didn't have the luxury to do that every time, right? So preferably, you do 2, you do 1 mock where you finalize your conversion activity, right? And then you estimate your time, right? How long it took. And then, as I said, you cannot keep having people go through a 72-hour period or a 48-hour period multiple times, right? Especially there will be business users who have their day-to-day job. So you cannot keep doing it so many different times, right? So even though we may not do it in a constrained time, we will, we'll spread that activity around, but we will do 1 mock to finalize, and then another mock which we will do very close to production cutover, where we will pretty much go through the plan, right? Just like we will do in production, we will pretty much use the same people who are executing, people who are validating, so that everyone have gone through at least 1 round of executing these activities and tasks before they do it in production cutover. So ideally, I would say, if you're doing a full conversion activities, you do 1 time as part of your UAT prep, then do at least 1 or 2 mocks before you do production cutover.
That's nice. How was the sensitive data protected during the migration?
Yeah. So one thing is, we didn't, this our activity didn't involve our HR system, right? So we don't use and HR is in Workday. So none of the legacy ERP systems had HR data, and our to be system also didn't have the HR data, right? That's one. So we didn't have personal information such as social security numbers or people's addresses and all those things we didn't have, right? Of course, we had and then even employee data was not converted, right? We used an interface to connect our Workday to Oracle Cloud. Even though it didn't have sensitive data, it had people like what their name is, what their designation is, what their hierarchy is. So even that we didn't convert, we did an interface, right? So a real-time interface to bring in that data. Similarly, we had our supplier master and our customer master data was there. Like in supplier master, there are things like banking information and all which we convert. So those activity were identified separately, right? Because to make sure that we pay a lot more attention to make sure the banking information are all converted, and we also had an ability to get the supplier to validate too, right there, because we were using supplier collaboration in our in our Oracle Cloud. So in some cases, we also had to extend and bring in the suppliers to do some validation too. But we didn't have too much of those sensitive information, right? Especially if you had serial numbers or credit card information, it would have been a much more difficult activity, or we would have had a separate focus on that, but we didn't deal with those.
That's great. What are the future data management opportunities you see for the industry you are a part of?
So I think this, the migration to, I mean, we are a cloud first company, right? So we have moved our core, ERP itself into cloud. So we are not fully completed our journey. So we have, we had 3 legacy ERP systems. Now we have 1 legacy ERP system, but, we have moved majority of our ERP operations into cloud. Similarly, we have moved most of the other applications. Also, our CRM is in Salesforce. Our HR system is in Workday. So we use extensively, cloud applications, right? So one thing which is going to be critical from the area that we're talking about data conversion is we are going to have disparate or federated environments in future, right? We're not going to have one big ERP like what we had before, right? Because we do have because we pick best of breed applications, so then your conversion activity becomes much more difficult too, right? Because you are now connecting the data to multiple cloud or multiple SaaS applications where you don't really have too much ability to customize, right? So you need to make sure that the amount of time and effort that you spend upfront in harmonizing the processes, harmonizing the data upfront as part of your project, and then doing the conversion activity is going to be critical. And I'm sure the trend of moving more and more to cloud is there. Right? It's not going to reverse anytime soon.
Great. So questions are coming in, Sendil. Did Changes tool perform well with the high volume data migration needs?
So I already mentioned about our serial number, right, which was the highest volume of data. So we managed conversion of we extracted, like we looked at the legacy tools which had like 2 billion serial numbers, right, and then we were able to extract and convert 600 million plus serial numbers. So that's a huge number. So everything else was less than that compared to the serial number conversion, right? If you look at the complexity was much more in other areas, like when it comes to purchase orders, sales orders, like customer master, so the complexity was different in each area, but the amount of data was much smaller. So we are it was able to handle, and then we wouldn't be surprised, right, when we are doing production conversion, right? Because if we know that we had a set time, right? So if we have to do serial number conversion in 4A, 4B, and 4A itself had several releases, so for every release we know that this conversion had to be done within 20 hours. So which means the tool has to do its part within the time, right? So we had to do mocks, and if the timing is the issue, then we would tweak it. We would do, in some cases, we had the advantage of doing pre-conversion activity and then identify the delta, right? So, but that won't be like, for example, inventory conversion is very difficult to do a pre-conversion, right? Because inventory keeps on moving, whether it's your inventory quantity or your serial number inventory, that is not possible. You have to do it within cutover. But whereas, our say customer serial number, the serial numbers which are already there in customers, even that is data that keeps changing, but the amount of change, right, depending on is much less, right? So there we would do the conversion activity as a pre-conversion and then limit the cutover conversion to just the delta, right? So we would do a lot of approaches, but when performance, we would know beforehand how long it takes, right? And
One
we've
last
never had any most of the time our production conversion will take less time than the previous mock, right? Because the production systems that we have always has more capacity than the other system.
That's great. One last question we'll take, Sendil. Did Changes have good knowledge on both Oracle and SAP to handle your project? Would you recommend Changes for a data migration project into Oracle or SAP?
That's right. I think so. That was the piece, right? So I did answer this also, but I would repeat, right? I'll be I'm very happy to repeat it. So I believe that whether it's data conversion, whether it's training or any activity involved, the people who are involved, they need, it's not just SAP or Oracle, right? So that is an easier part, right? So, but most important is they should know, the people who are involved in serial number, they should know what it is, right? It is not just a number with another 100 attributes, right? So there is a role that a serial number plays in a company, right? There is a role that a purchase order plays. There is a role that a supplier master plays. Until the people who are involved understand these things, it's very difficult for them to add too much value, right? If they were just going to be doing monotonous activity, and that wouldn't have worked. So the best, the best thing that I've seen with the guys who are involved with us, right, from Changes, right, is that they clearly understood those transactions. So we had, in some cases, we had both people who had worked on SAP conversions, worked on Oracle conversion, because we had both right tools, right? So we had to get both, multiple resources on to understand both. But more than just SAP or Oracle, the business knowledge or the functional knowledge of the team, right? The girls and guys who are involved in us, right? So that made a big difference in my mind.
That's awesome. We have another 5 minutes. Sendil, do you want to take one last question?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. Can the serialization be handled through blockchain?
Yes, I mean, we are going through some of those, right, with our customers who are, establishing blockchains, right? So yeah, we can. I mean, in our case, the serialization was not just a repository for track and trace or for historic information, right? So we had to build logistics transactions based on these serial numbers, because when we are doing the pick pack, and when we are building these handling units, and then we are shipping these handling units from site to site, or when we are shipping it to the customer, we are interacting with EDI. So we are using it for multiple purposes. So we had to build a track and trace system. But a blockchain, what I've seen recently, I wouldn't name our customers, but recently is that we are working more and more with customers where we are putting those serial number information in blockchain.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Sendil. This, I think, is the most interactive session. Lots of questions you had to answer. Though it was the first session after lunch, it was the most interactive. And thank you so much for taking your time off and being on this Be Connected conference with us. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you. Bye.